Hi. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. I am Rizwan Ali, and I am research lead at Policy Research Institute, a think tank based in London. And today we are doing this series of webinar. And basically, this think tank is focusing on South Asia. And we know that 20 years back, there was a huge disaster that changed majority of the country and how the disaster risk management happened after that. So the topic of this webinar is the 20 years after Indian Ocean tsunami, Sri Lanka's progress in disaster risk management, a public health perspective. And I'm really thankful for Dr. Lahiru Kodithuwakku for giving his time and valuable perspective in this regard. Let me give a brief introduction to Dr. Lahiru. Dr. Lahiru is a distinguished expert in community medicine and disaster risk reduction. Dr. Lahiru holds an MBBS MSc in community medicine, MSc in disaster risk reduction and development, an MBA and a postgraduate diploma in health sector disaster management. Dr. Lahiru was the secretary of Sri Lanka Medical Association for the year 2024 and is currently serving as the editor of the Association of Disaster Risk Management Professionals Sri Lanka. He is also a doctoral researcher at the University of Huddersfield, UK. Dr. Lahiru has made significant contribution to the public health and disaster management. His work with the National Dengue Control Unit, Ministry of Health, and his expertise in developing strategies for disaster risk reduction, focusing on community resilience and sustainable development, are highly commendable. And I also thank all of the participants who are already joined this session and who might be joining later on as well. So just for the housekeeping, during the presentation may take around 20 to 25 minutes, and I request everyone to please turn off your microphone and also the camera so that we can record this presentation and will be uploaded on PRISA's social accounts as well. And you can write your questions while during the presentation in the chat box, and after the presentation, one by one, we will take the question, or you can ask question directly after the presentation. Okay. Thank you so much for joining again. Dr. Leru, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rizwan. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I hope you can hear me well. Rizwan, you can hear me well, right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Yes, as you said, 20 years on after the Indian Ocean tsunami, we will be examining what is the progress that Sri Lanka has taken in, especially in disaster risk management, and also particularly in the public health perspective. Because as you all know, when it comes to disaster risk forums, the public health perspective is not that much spoken of. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. So my presentation will go through several thematic areas. First of all, we will be looking at the disaster risk profile of Sri Lanka in a very nutshell, disaster risk management, and also public health landscape in Sri Lanka. Also, again, briefly, we will be examining these two areas. Then the situation prior to the disaster, the situation prior to the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. And what happened after the tsunami, the paradigm shift in disaster risk management, and also in some aspects of public health management in the country, and also some of the lessons learned and the challenges following the Indian Ocean tsunami. We will be examining in length about these challenges and also about these lessons learned, and what we have to look forward. Perhaps the policy and the practice nexus. We all know that we have made different policies, numerous policies to that extent, and what extent of those policies have been transformed into practice. We will be examining this policy practice nexus in the latter half of my presentation. Let me give you a brief about Sri Lanka for our overseas participants. As you all know, Sri Lanka is a tropical island strategically located in the Indian Ocean. The total land area of 65,610 square kilometers with a population of approximately 22 million. A multi-ethnic, multi-religious country, and also a country blessed with diverse climate and ecological zones, and also a biodiversity hotspot. According to economic analysis, Sri Lanka is categorized as a low middle income country, but with a very high development index, human development index compared to its neighbors. Our HDI rank is around 76. Country is administratively divided into 9 provinces, 25 districts, and also around 14,000 Gram Niladhari divisions. That is the lowest administrative setup in Sri Lanka. We will see how it is important to engage with these Gram Niladhari divisions when it comes to DRM and public health management in Sri Lanka in the coming slides. When it comes to disasters, we have a relatively high vulnerability to climate-induced disasters. Our climate risk index is 31. That means our vulnerability to weather-related events, and also our informed risk index is around 97. That means the informed risk index categorizes the risk about humanitarian crisis and complex disasters. So in both ends, the weather-related events and also complex and humanitarian disasters, we are ranked relatively high in the region. We have a history of complex humanitarian crises from civil war to COVID-19 outbreak and also the economic meltdown. So that is Sri Lanka in a nutshell. Now, if you examine the disaster risk profile of Sri Lanka is usually highly vulnerable towards hydrometeorological events like floods and droughts. That is 2 or 3 decades back, but now the picture has completely changed, right? So over the past 3 decades, more than 10 million Sri Lankans were affected by floods, the major hydrometeorological disaster that we have experienced. Drought, a protracted disaster, have affected around 8 million people between 2008 to 2018. We had several bouts of drought in those periods. And they say, like in research, they say on average, 750,000 people were affected by natural disasters annually from a period of 2011 to 2020. Yes, we do have high vulnerability to extreme weather events and also biological hazards. We had a history of malaria, and also we are having dengue, which is highly endemic to Sri Lanka, and we are still struggling to prevent such biological hazards. Um, when it comes to future projections, the research suggests that 19 million Sri Lankans live in locations which are said to be climate hotspots by 2050, moderate to severe climate hotspot. So the vulnerability is still evolving, and we will be facing the same vulnerabilities in future as well. Now, if you take a look at the annual disaster losses in monetary terms, average annual disaster loss in Sri Lanka, particularly for relief and also loss of infrastructure and loss of agriculture, it's around 13 million US dollars. So the disaster risk profile wise or disaster risk vulnerability wise, Sri Lanka is comparatively on a high vulnerable node compared to other regional countries in the South Asia region and also the largest Southeast Asian region. Now, let me examine the DRM landscape in Sri Lanka briefly, disaster risk management landscape, since we have a understanding on the vulnerabilities that are associated with the country. Now, the legal basis for disaster management, disaster risk management in Sri Lanka is Sri Lanka Disaster Management Act number 13 of 2005, which provides the legal basis for DM in Sri Lanka. This was enacted after the tsunami. I will tell the story in length in coming slides. And from this act, they established what you call the National Council for Disaster Management, NCDM. That is the highest policymaking body on disaster management within the country. His Excellency the President is the chairman, and the Prime Minister is the vice chairman, and we also have the opposition leader and 9 chief ministers from the 9 provinces, and all the related ministries that are engaged in disaster-related activities, preparedness, relief, and mitigation also. So all these ministries are also represented within this NCDM. This has to be convened when there is a national level disaster, and President has to declare it as a national level disaster, and this body has to convene. But unfortunately, this has been convened very, I mean, I say like during the recent disasters. It has not been convened at all. So there is this question of functionality and the relevance of this highest decision-making body or policy-making body when it comes to National Council for Disaster Management, and there are efforts to revive it lately as well. So NCDM formulates the National Disaster Management Action Plan, right? And also there is this plan called National Emergency Operations Plan, or in short, it's called NEOP. So the National Disaster Management Plan and also the National Emergency Operations Plan has to be formulated through this highest policy-making body. And now we are in the process of finalizing this National Action Plan for Disaster Management 2024 to 2029. It's at the cabinet level now. This particular act, which is a very powerful act when it comes to disaster management in Sri Lanka, it has 21 different events categorized as disasters, from floods to landslides, biological hazards like epidemics. But as the disaster management landscape is evolving now, the professionals are questioning whether we need to add several more disasters into this list of disasters identified, 21 disasters identified in the Disaster Management Act. What is the relevance of some of these disasters that they have identified earlier? So those are the questions that are still sort of in debate. So this act particularly established the Disaster Management Center, DMC, which is the coordinating body for disaster preparedness, response, mitigation, and as well as relief in the country. It acts as the mandated coordinating body of the government of Sri Lanka within the disaster management spectrum. Now, this is the composition of the National Council for Disaster Management. As I said, the chairperson is His Excellency the President. From the top level of the government, all the relevant ministries are represented. Now, when it comes to public health landscape, also we do have very extensive public health in the sense both curative sector as well as the public preventive health sector. So this extensive public health system covers the entire island, offering free healthcare services at the doorstep. That is the most important thing. Sri Lanka has a free healthcare system. And they say, like, in every 4 kilometers, you can find a government healthcare facility, whether it's a hospital or a primary healthcare center. So the extent of the public health arm is as such. Both curative sector, the hospital-based sector, and also the preventive healthcare services work in tandem, actually. They deliver a shared care model where the patients are being looked out for their treatment from the curative health sector, and also the preventive aspects and the health promotion aspects are being looked after by the preventive healthcare sector. We have around 1,500 healthcare institutions island-wide, of which 588 are hospitals of different grades, different specialties. We have national hospitals, specialized hospitals, teaching hospitals, then general hospitals, provincial general hospitals, base hospitals, and divisional hospitals. So they cater for different needs of the people at different levels. We also do have around 570 primary healthcare institutions, and also smaller divisional hospitals where we offer outpatient department services, not the inward services. The most important thing when it comes to public health structure in Sri Lanka, as I said earlier, the preventive health sector. We have around 350 preventive healthcare institutions called Medical Office of Health Office. That is the grassroots level healthcare provider in Sri Lanka, where you have the grassroots level healthcare workers like public health inspectors and public health midwives who go door to door to provide health, preventive health, and also the health promotion aspects in the field. If you take the number of patients that are being catered by the public health system in Sri Lanka, public health sector or the government health sector handles around 95% of the inpatient care and also 50% of the outpatient care. Total health expenditure wise, both the public and also the private sector combined, it's around 3.8% of the gross domestic product. But the government, all the public health expenditure is around 1.5, and a minor percentage is being dedicated for preventive health sector as well. Although most of the successes that we have achieved is purely because of the strength of this public preventive health sector in Sri Lanka, working in tandem with the curative health sector. So although we have a very low cost healthcare model when it comes to public health, Sri Lanka has been able to deliver one of probably the best health indicators in the South Asia region for some aspects, like the lowest maternal mortality ratio, low infant mortality rates, and also we have eliminated numerous diseases, communicable diseases, infectious diseases, vaccine preventable diseases such as polio, malaria, congenital rubella syndrome, and mother to child transmission of HIV and STI. So the successes are many, even though our sort of the investment on public health is comparatively less when compared to some of the other countries. Now, when it comes to disasters, Sri Lanka is no stranger to disaster from its, even before the independence, as we commemorate our 74th independence today. Even before the independence, we had uh, several large-scale disasters. For example, 1934, 1935, we had the malaria epidemic where almost 80,000 people died within a span of 7 months. 80,000 people within a span of 7 months. And in 1978, we had perhaps the strongest cyclone that has been ever recorded in Sri Lanka in 1978. Nearly 1,000 died, over 1 million displaced, and also around 2,500 structures were destroyed in the eastern and northern part of Sri Lanka. They call it the Batiklo cyclone because of the eastern part is involved. So around 1,000 died. And when it comes to protracted crises, as I mentioned earlier, like the drought in 2001, 2002, over 800,000 people affected, and we call for international help as well. That is one instance, apart from the tsunami, that we have called for international relief. Civil conflict, I don't have to mention, from 1983 onwards, more than 70,000 deaths recorded. Still, they are debating what is the exact number, both civilian and battlefield casualties, and enormous infrastructure loss. And also when it comes to biological hazards, we had epidemics like dengue in 1996 prior to the tsunami, where around 1,298 dengue hemorrhagic fever cases, but the case fatality rate was very high, 4.2%, with 54 deaths. So we had our fair share of disasters, a varied picture from natural disasters to complex disasters and also man-made human disasters. So pre-tsunami era, public health was, when it comes to disaster management, public health was tailored to handle mostly the war casualties or mass casualty incidents following frequent terror attacks. But late 90s, we see the emergence of operation centers. Operation centers were sort of a novel idea in Sri Lanka when it comes to early 80s and 90s. But late 90s, we see the emergence of operation center, a rudimentary operation center in National Hospital, Sri Lanka, just to cater for the MCI, so mass casualty incidents following these war effort. Right. We also had a rudimentary setup in hospitals like Anuradhapura. Anuradhapura is situated in between Jaffna and Sri Lanka, at Jaffna and Colombo, in a transit point where war casualties are transferred from Jaffna to Colombo. So we had a similar setup. Early 2000, there were ad hoc operation centers managed by the military in response to series of trade union actions within the health sector. So from the year 2000 to 2004, we had several instances where there were ad hoc operation centers manned by the military inside the civilian infrastructure, inside the Ministry of Health, just to cope with the frequent trade union actions by healthcare staff, just to supplement these healthcare staff and also just to run the hospitals uninterrupted. During 2003 major flood, we also had an emergency operations center. So public health involvement in disasters are confined to these emergency operations centers when it comes to war casualties and also other natural disasters. But communicable diseases or infectious disease outbreaks, yes, the public health sector manage these disasters or these outbreaks or these emergencies through their preventive health structure spread across the country with the help of the curative sector. So, in the absence of a proper DRM system, public health system responded to most of these health emergencies and casualties, disasters almost exclusively. But the search and rescue part or the response part was mainly handled by the armed forces. Social services department, there is also a part of the government, and the government agents spread across 25 districts. They handle the relief and essential provisions part. So these three sectors, the public health sector, the armed forces, and the social services sector, those are the three sectors that handled disasters prior to tsunami, because there was no structured approach to prepare for disasters and also respond to disasters. But all these changed on 26 December 2004 at 9:26 a.m. We were hit by the South Asian tsunami. Over 30,000 deaths, 8,000 missing persons, nearly 900,000 people displaced, and 79,000 structures or houses destroyed. So if you can remember, one of the incident, the parallel train incident, is the worst railway accident recorded in the history of the world, where more than 1,000 casualties at that singular moment. So, so that was the complex scenario that was unfolded after the tsunami. So this prompted us to think different. And when the tsunami hit, the public health infrastructure was also badly hit, particularly in the eastern part of the country. Around 10 major hospitals were completely destroyed in Trincomalee and Ampara district, situated in the eastern part of the country. And also from the southern province, there were some destructions. So some of the hospitals were made non-operational or barely operational following the tsunami. So that is where we thought that we have to sort of think different how we respond to disasters hereinafter. So during the initial aftermath of the tsunami, the response, there was countrywide deployment of all government departments. And the initial response was substantially contributed by the volunteers, people from all walks of life. So volunteerism was there. They helped the government entities to do the initial response. There was an international call for help from the government of Sri Lanka, and massive influx of donations and support from UN agencies and INGOs. Right. So this is where a structured national operations center was established. Within 2 days of this disaster, we had a emergency operations center at the office of the president, and after 2 days, we had a proper national operations center or a task force at the PM's Prime Minister's office. Right. So there was massive displacement of people. So this operation center has to manage this displacement, and also a very tricky issue, actually, the dead body disposal. It was challenging after the tsunami, because we had a major challenge in identification of dead bodies, mass burial of dead bodies, and also retrieval of some of these bodies, especially when it comes to foreigners. So those were the issues that were highlighted during initial aftermath of the tsunami. But when it comes to response and also relief, there was flooding of these different kind of medical teams, relief teams, often duplicating the same work with no central coordination. Even though we had a coordination unit at the Prime Minister's office, at the ground there was hardly any coordination when it comes to relief. So there were further influx of aid even after the fulfillment of requirements. So there was ample evidence of wastage of resources. There were some unethical practices. For example, several teams were caught red-handed taking samples from the patients and taking samples from the displaced persons without any prior approval. There were parachute research as well. There were no prioritization at all for sexual and reproductive health services or mental health services because the entire effort was tailor-made to care for the trauma and also the displaced persons' basic human rights, basic human needs. Uh, some say there is white saviorism as well. That is debatable. So this made a paradigm shift in the way we think on several aspects after the tsunami. Legal, as I said earlier, the government of Sri Lanka accepted the urgent need for a structured and a methodical approach in disaster management in Sri Lanka. So they enacted the Disaster Management Act and they established the Disaster Management Center. So institutional wise, Disaster Management Center was established. The Ministry of Health also established a public health EOC, Emergency Operations Center, first of its kind in 2008. Later, this public health EOC was elevated to Disaster Preparedness and Response Division, in short, DPRD, a mandated agency within the Ministry of Health, headed by Additional Secretary of Health, to coordinate the health sector disaster preparedness and response. So that was a milestone in the public health perspective when it comes to disaster management. And also we established different provincial HEOC, so Health Emergency Operation Centers as well. When it comes to policy and strategy, there was this landmark standing operating procedure for tsunami early warnings by the Ministry of Health. This is still being used for some aspects of disaster management, where you include algorithms for evacuation, both horizontal evacuation and vertical evacuation of hospitals, and also allocation of supporting hospitals. Whenever the hospitals that are situated in the coastal line was affected by a tsunami, what are the options for these hospitals, how they coordinate with the other hospitals inland, what are the supporting structures that they have. All these structures were very well written and also practiced through this standing operating procedure for tsunami warning. So that is one of the landmark strategies that the health ministry was able to make following this tsunami. And also formulation of the national action plans for disaster management and national emergency operations plans. When it comes to public health, the quarantine Directorate of Quarantine and also the epidemiology unit were established as they were early established. They were functional, but they were established as international health regulation focal points, ensuring safety against the important infections and diseases at the port of entry. So that was also another significant movement that we have gained after tsunami. District disaster management plans for health sector, especially involving hospitals and also medical office of health officers were drafted following the tsunami. Capacity building wise, we had several important milestones. There were risk assessment in hospitals, almost all the hospitals on a yearly basis. Base hospital upwards, we had risk assessment followed by mass casualty simulations or drills, so that the health staff are catered and also health staff are equipped with the skills and knowledge to handle a mass casualty event. There was this particular postgraduate qualification for doctors started at the Postgraduate Institute of Medicine called the Health Sector Disaster Management. I was one lucky candidate to go through this unique course where you train doctors to handle disasters as disaster managers. So this is one of the landmark events following disasters when it comes to following the tsunami, when it comes to capacity building in Sri Lanka. And also disaster management was included in postgraduate curricula in public health, health administration and nutrition and so forth. So what were the lessons learned from post-tsunami era? So even after the tsunami, we had several major disasters with severe casualties. One such example is the internally displaced person crisis immediately aftermath of the cessation of the civil war in 2009. So that is the place where we had the first-hand experience in managing large populations in displacement, because we had some experience during the tsunami, but it was scattered. It was here and there. But at one single place, we had to manage a very large population, more than 300,000 internally displaced persons within the place called Manik Farm in Chetticulam. We have to manage a large population of displacement. So the entire disaster management sector and also the public health sector learned many lessons through this IDP crisis, where we catered for the WASH aspects, the MCH aspect, the mental health and the nutrition aspect of large displaced population, and also the disaster management sector practice their logistics, their coordination, and their communication skills during this particular event. Dengue epidemic of 2017 was again a major crisis that happens after the tsunami. Over 180,000 cases with nearly 400 fatalities. But the landmark, the most important point in this particular disaster was the civil-military collaboration. So the military came into the help of the health sector just to supplement the spaces that they need to manage the influx of patients. And also these grassroots level public health workers like the PHIs and also the dengue mosquito control assistants. They played a major role with the help of the armed forces. So this particular event after the tsunami taught us a lesson about the civil military coordination, how effective civil military coordination and collaboration can be used to manage large scale public health disasters. Easter Sunday attack 2019 was a surprise, but so it took all the disaster management sector and the public health sector by surprise, actually. So that is also a landmark event where we had to initiate all what we have learned from the time of tsunami to manage casualties. So the disaster management plan at the National Hospital Colombo was activated in a very true sense, right? So the entire plan was activated and first responders were mobilized. The difference is now we had these the suicide pre-ambulance services. They were deployed to these areas, and the Public Health Emergency Operations Center at the DPRD, or the Disaster Preparedness and Response Division, was the first to respond to mobilize ambulances from other parts of the country, other hospitals, and managing different hospitals. So this event actually helped us to sort of learn more and also save lives more through activation of disaster management plans and activation of emergency plans, which were in the books previously, but we had to practice it because we had no other option. So these plans were sort of practiced, and they were initiated in an environment where there is a total internet and also social media ban. So the communication was very challenging, but even with these challenges, health sector was able to cater for most of the casualties, and also we had to improvise. I say improvise with the dead body management as well during this particular disaster. COVID-19 pandemic taught us, not only us, I think the entire globe, several lessons. There was establishment of a presidential task force to coordinate. And also there was heavy military involvement for infrastructure expansion. That is the first time in a disaster that military directly involved for such level of infrastructure expansion, hospitals, labs, quarantine centers. And also there is still debate how military involved with the public health sector in Sri Lanka during the COVID-19 pandemic. There were positive ideas and also negative ideas, because military involvement in traditionally public health domain, for example, the contact tracing, isolation, quarantine, vaccine drives. So military was heavily involved. So this is the first time that we had such military involvement during a public health crisis. So going forward, challenges. Right now, we have gone through what was the pre-tsunami area, what was the situation in the post-tsunami area, and we have to examine some of these challenges. So how we redefine the governance structure, because our response and our preparedness have been sort of a compartmentalized approach, fragmented or siloed approach, whereas in the future, we might need to have a cohesive approach of all government sectors involved in the different disasters. We have a demographic transition in the country. Our population is aging. So what are the needs that we have to sort of cater when it comes to disasters in future? It might be elderly care, it might be disability access. So those are the aspects that we have to think when it comes to future disaster. And those are the challenges that we might expect. And also looking beyond the traditional model of public health and DRM to accommodate novel technologies, because our systems, both DRM and public health systems, are heavily dependent on paper-based structures. From surveillance to response, we are heavily dependent on paper-based structures and some of the protocols. Yes, it's good that you have to have some paper-based structures and you do have to continue them, but also you need to look beyond the paper-based structures to digitalize the entire system. That will save money, that will save more lives, and that will initiate timely action. So looking beyond the traditional models of public health and also traditional models of DRM, disaster risk management, to accommodate novel technologies will be a challenge in future. So looking forward, what we can expect from the policy and practice nexus point of view, in a system perspective, we have to definitely prioritize our early warning, and we have to sustain whatever the early warning systems that we have placed following this tsunami. That is very important. I know that some of these tsunami towers are non-functional now. So what are our alternatives for that? And we have to prioritize early warning, not only in disaster risk management perspective, but also in public health perspective for different kinds of disasters. A health incident command structure is vital because we do have some structure of responding, we do have some structure of preparedness for public health disasters and also the DRM, but it need to be structured in a way that there is a proper incident command structure so that you don't have to duplicate the same initiatives that you are doing in different sectors. So an incident command system is a must. Space-wise, infrastructure resilience, particularly in case of critical infrastructure, is very important. Say like the Safe Hospital Initiative, where you look into the structural and non-structural and functional aspects of a hospital. The hospital has to run uninterrupted during a disaster, so infrastructure resilience is important. How we approach surge capacity, that is also important. How we can utilize some of these non-functional structures or underutilized structures whenever there's public health emergency or a disaster of national significance, how we can accommodate these structures to entertain surge capacity, that need to be looked after. People-wise, now, as you all know, there is a migration of skilled workers from the country due to economic crisis. So how can we retain these skilled workers? That is also important because we need skilled persons to run the DRM and public health sector in Sri Lanka if we are to achieve what we are intended to achieve. Equitable distribution of health card is also important, and also the continued capacity building, particularly in the curative sector on emergency management when it comes to public health. During non-emergency times, it's very important that we keep on training people on disaster management aspects and emergency management. Finances, as we all know, we do not have at the moment a dedicated fund for emergency preparedness, response, and mitigation in the health sector and also in the DRM sectors for some instances. So emergency funding allocation, how we allocate funds during a disaster, and how we can cut those red tapes to disperse funds on an urgent basis during a disaster. Those have to be specified and those have to be learned as well. Cross-cutting wise, we have been approaching disasters on a very individual basis. Biological disasters, man-made disasters, natural disasters. But the time has come for us to see it as a all hazard approach, because the future disasters will be in multi-hazard setting and also in a cascading mode. So we have to look into all hazard approach, and we have to practice our personnel, and we have to tailor-made some of our structures, critical infrastructures, to cater for this whole all hazard approach. Climate sensitive DM planning, climate sensitive and disability sensitive DM planning is important, and also focus on some of the novel disasters that will be emerging, like the CBRNs, chemical, biological, nuclear, and explosive related disasters. So we need to train our first responders, we need to train our public health system, and also the DM sector to handle these CBRN related disasters or novel disasters that we might encounter. So finally, 20 years on, have we progressed? So if you ask me this question, the answer will be a cautious yes. We have gained some experience. We have learned our lessons. We have created structures. We have created SOPs. We have created policies. But now it's time for us to connect these policies with the practice at the ground. And we have to sustain our capacities and think beyond the traditional model of public health domain and also the disaster risk management domain. that will ultimately determine our future as a resilient nation. Because to be resilient, we have to accommodate new technologies. We have to think about the future disaster scenarios. We have to predict, forecast, and our early warning structures has to be strengthened in case there's a disaster, there's an unknown disaster, for say. So 20 years on, we have definitely progressed, but we do have to travel more distance. If we are to declare as a disaster resilience nation. So thank you very much. I think I have covered the situation prior to the tsunami, and also immediately after the tsunami, and also the modern day times where we have to deal with different kinds of disasters. I would like to acknowledge some of the contributions from Dr. Hemant Herath, who was the former National Coordinator at the Disaster Preparedness and Response Division in the Ministry of Health. Dr. Sudat Samaravira was the Chief Epidemiologist, former Chief Epidemiologist, and also the Director, National Dengue Control Unit, Dr. Jagat Amarsekar, Dr. Novel Vijaysekar, and now some of the technical staff at Disaster Management Center. So if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lahiru. It was a wonderful, wonderful presentation and a very detailed one. You covered a lot from early times from Sri Lanka and all the way even before the tsunami and what is happening at present. Thank you so much for this presentation. It's wonderful. And we already got one question in the chat. If any of our participants got any question, just please raise your hand and introduce yourself, and you can directly ask question, or otherwise you can write your question in the chat box. So we have one question from BJC. Excellent presentation, Lahiru. Congratulations. One portal that may come in quite useful is artificial intelligence and its many connected tentacles to speak. Any thoughts on this? Yeah, wonderful question on artificial intelligence, how we can use in disaster management settings. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, BJ, sir, for the question. Yes, I think novel technologies such as artificial intelligence, it has pros and cons both when it comes to disaster management. But yes, artificial intelligence can be used for particularly in the sense of disaster prediction and also early warning, because some of the countries in the Western world are still now using these AI models to predict disaster scenarios. Because as I said earlier, now the future disaster scenario would be a multi-hazard scenario where you have different kinds of disasters given at one time. For example, now you might have a dengue epidemic when there's a warning for tsunami. You might have a COVID-19 similar influenza epidemic when there's a warning for an earthquake. So how you manage these situations? Sometimes these to understand the dynamics of these situations, we might need the help of technology. That is where the AI comes in to create different models where we can predict the extent of destruction, where we can predict the areas that will be vulnerable for these particular disasters. So AI can help us to model these, and subsequently we will be able to also model our response as well through AI. Having said that, there are the negative aspects of AI when it comes to disasters as well. Even though we predict these disasters through AI and also we predict our response through AI, it's always the community knowledge that we have to input into these models, because purely AI models won't work in a practically in a disaster setting, because we have to gather the local knowledge or the community knowledge and supplement our AI models, our AI prediction models with this community knowledge, so that we can have a sort of a cohesive plan to respond to these disasters. Hope I have answered your questions. Yes, I think.
Please unmute your mic.
Sorry. Thank you, Larry. It was a wonderful answer, and you very well mentioned about there are some pros and cons about using this technology. And one thing that you mentioned about the community aspect as well. Most of this time at the present, whatever models we have for AI is kind of a Western influence and are trained. So whatever our indigenous knowledge, the community knowledge may be, still we need to see. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful answer, and I think probably maybe in the future we might see the optimal use of limited resources that we have in our countries, especially in South Asia, and to collect the vast data, and most of those time can be used. So at the moment we don't have any hand raised, so I take the liberty to ask a question from myself. How you think, over 20 years or more, the role of community has changed, because we know that they are the first respondent as well, and they are also the first one who goes. So in terms of engaging them, whatever the disaster management plans that we prepare, or training them, how their role, community's role, changed in past 2 decades? Thank you.
Yes. So I must say there was this watershed moment in community engagement during the COVID-19 outbreak. As I said earlier, it's one like in very Sri Lankan setting, in a very Sri Lankan perspective, uh, people voluntarily sort of come towards helping other people when it comes to disaster. It may be at a regional, very local level, at the village level, where people uh, tend to the early response. It might be at a roadside where you observe a road traffic accident, but the people, the tuk-tuk drivers, the bystanders will definitely help the victim. So there is always this notion of volunteerism in Sri Lanka that was very visible during almost all disasters, because people welcome displaced people whenever there's a flood or a landslide within a village setup. But the COVID-19 actually sort of changed the entire spectrum, because there were many unknowns during the COVID-19. So people were reluctant to volunteer for support. So we sort of witnessed this at the central level and also at the peripheral level as well. So this volunteerism or the community engagement was comparatively less following COVID-19. So if I am to describe the community engagement, how they have been engaged in the disaster response, yes, prior to tsunami and also in the immediate aftermath of the tsunami, people were engaged, people were helping others. And also in most of the disaster management plans, for namesake even, they were included. But following COVID-19, the entire scenario changed a little bit. Now, when it comes to disaster, we have to call for these village committees to be activated. Sometimes there are village disaster management committees, but most of them are non-functional. So it's a matter of continuous involvement and also regaining that volunteerism that was there prior to COVID-19, and building the community trust. So the DM sector and also the public health sector, if they have say the capacity to regain this public trust again, and also continuously train these community responders, first responders particularly, then we will have the proper community representation in disaster management sector and also public health sector in Sri Lanka. But as of now, compared to earlier times, I may say it's less, but we have to sort of keep on working, because the public trust and the public volunteerism and also the public engagement can be built through years, right? Hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Leru. Leru, can you just stop this screen sharing so that when we
Sure, sure.
prepare all those questions separately, it looks really good. I saw one hand was raised earlier. Any question from the audience? Thank you. So, so one more aspect of, if we talk about the health sector, is the mental health, and we are very well aware that not only in, especially if I talk about Pakistan, So that aspect of mental health and how those trauma and other things are not being considered as a problem or as a challenge to solve. Is there any in the books or anywhere it is mentioned or it is happening on ground or anything you can share your experience?
Yes, particularly during this Easter Sunday attack, I think it
Mm,
was a shock to the entire spectrum of the society, irrespective of the religion that you follow in Sri Lanka. So we had from the health ministry perspective and also perspective of the disaster management authorities, we had a very sort of a challenging time how we prioritize mental health of these victims, because say like entire village we had the each of the house
mm,
so houses sort of impacted by this particular bombing. We had funerals in each of the house. So how you sort of approach this kind of a situation where the entire community is affected,
mm, mm,
how you approach the mental health services. So in a very traditional way, Sri Lanka's mental health structure was more geared towards, I say, psychiatry, or treating diseases of the mind, right?
mm,
So it's more of a very medicalized approach. But when it comes to disaster, you may agree, we do have to have the medicalized approach, but there is also this community element of mental health that
mm,
has not been prioritized. So this was exposed during the Easter Sunday attacks in Sri Lanka. So following that, most of the DRM and also the public health sector professionals thought how we can sort of manage this situation, and that is where the MHPSS aspects come in, and also the mental health first aid or psychological first aid, where you don't need a trained individual or a trained professional like a psychiatrist or a psychologist to entertain these aspects. So you can train a community leader, or you can train a youth person to deliver this psychological first aid. So those are the areas where we need improvement in Sri Lanka. I know not only in Sri Lanka, also in a very South Asian
mm,
perspective, the entire mental health spectrum is medicalized. So we need to sort of look beyond the medicalized aspects and go into community aspects of mental health, like the psychological first aid. So that is where our answer lies.
mm. I think wonderful answer. Not only obviously the capacity of our health sector is not that good, and if we add the mental health aspect as well, so it will no doubt overburden. And I think using the community involvement in that aspect, it will be very wonderful idea as well. Any question from our audience? Uh, Later, I think we are done with our question answer session. Before I let you go, I would like to invite Dr. Umar Farooq. He is our chairman, board of trustees, PRISA think tank, and he will have some concluding remarks regarding this presentation and overall. Thank you. May I invite Dr. Umar Farooq, please join us for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Rizwan. Thank you, Dr. Lahiru. This is the first time that we have so few questions put to the guest speakers, and I can very well understand it was because your presentation covered almost not only all the aspects that needed to be covered, but even more than the expectation of the participants. Kudos, my thanks, my heartfelt appreciation. It was a wonderful presentation, and it showed everyone that obviously you are at the top of your game. So, my appreciation before I say anything about it. Now, coming to this Boxing Day tsunami, as we remember it, we all know it was a heart-rending catastrophe, and 36,000 people, according to one estimate, alone in Sri Lanka. That ripped the heart of the island nation. Uh, it was a massive catastrophe, and it sort of reminded me of the 2005 earthquake in Pakistan. And in response to the 2005 earthquake, similar institutions, as you mentioned in your presentation, they cropped up in Pakistan. And we did develop some disaster management expertise in certain areas which we did not have before that. And different levels, different tiers of disaster management administration we saw dealing with the future disasters in Pakistan, the National Disaster Management Authority and provincial and then district level. So there was quite a few relatable points in your presentation, which we in Pakistan could obviously relate to. Early warning systems were put in place for the first time. We did not even know what early warning systems were. And I'm sure this is the fate of the third world countries. These are the things which we come to respond to. It is not like we have the resources to put them in place before the disaster strikes. It is only in response to disasters that we come up with such institutions and funding being directed to those institutions. There were wonderful points, wonderful lessons to be learned from your presentation. For example, when you said that it was still being considered how many disasters needed to be in the list of legislation, that amply shows us that such endeavors or such initiatives are always an ongoing process. They are never written in stone, written on stone. They are ongoing processes, and they need to evolve with the evolution of society, with the evolution of environment, the new threats and challenges which the environment keeps on throwing to our faces. These responses need to be upgraded, and we need to be vigilant all the time that we are in a position to respond to the upcoming challenges and threats. So evolution is the key. That was the first lesson which I think we can take home from your wonderful presentation. You also said that towards the end of your presentation, you said that there were no dedicated funds for disaster management, still no dedicated funds for DM, which will be a scary thought given the precarious. In fact, it's not proximal to the ocean. It is within the ocean. It is an island. Sri Lanka is a small island, and we, an expert like you, saying that we do not still have dedicated funds for disaster management there. And we also know that Sri Lankan economy has been in dire straits of late. Recently, it was the first time in Sri Lankan history that we saw the island nation defaulting on its foreign payments. So it can be anybody's guess that when the economy of any country, any third world country in particular, is in dire straits, we will see funds being diverted from areas like disaster management towards sectors needing urgent daily finances. So we can only hope and pray that a disaster of such magnitude, even of a much smaller magnitude, does not strike a country like Pakistan, India, where we do not have sufficient resources at our disposal to strike when the economy is bad. When the economy is doing bad, we can only hope and pray that such disasters do not happen. So even with our best intentions and the best lessons which we learn from such disasters, it always comes down to prayer, like for economies like ours and most of the economies in South Asia. Another very important lesson, you told us that the military came for help. And I was going through some literature, and I saw that it was not only military. Among the first responders were foreign help as well. Like India was very forthcoming in helping Sri Lanka, and I also came across a piece of information that a U.S. fleet of 3 ships, it moved from Diego Garcia, which isn't too far. So it was in a position to respond, and they were there because they had to provide some relief to Iraq. So they diverted that towards Sri Lanka. So the lesson for us at PRISA, which we can take home, is that regional cooperation can be the key. It is the answer. If we have good neighborly relations, and we at PRISA are continuously trying to forge a way of integration of these regional societies and economies into a whole. That is our goal. And your presentation also drives home this very fundamental of messages, that if you have good relations with your neighbors, it is in times like these, in times like the Boxing Day tsunami, God forbid if it were ever to happen again, it is in times like these when your good relations with your neighbors come in good. They are the way out, and they rescue so much in terms of life and property and economy. Finally, we also have been very appreciative of uh, military's involvement. And whenever there is a disaster, even in Pakistan, the military is at the forefront of disaster relief efforts. But we have everybody. I'm sure you would also appreciate that militaries should be better left to their own tasks, and the civilian institutions, they should be equipped, their skill level, the training of their staff, the funding, and obviously automation. All of these things should strengthen and empower the civilian institutions. And it is not a good idea, because I'm certain, even in the best of economies, if a catastrophe as huge as this one was to visit them, every institution, including the military, would be involved as the first line of defense or the first responders. But to expect the military to be there for a task which it is not prepared or which it is not trained in delivering, that would not be a good idea. And the civil institutions should be empowered and strengthened to deliver on this front. This Yet again, there are so many lessons to be learned. And for the ideal of regional integration, which at the platform of PRISA we espouse as our most basic of goals. I would again thank you, Dr. Lahiru. It was a wonderful presentation. I am so looking forward to any other presentation that you might have to give, and to honor the platform of PRISA. I would be very grateful. Thank you once again on behalf of PRISA and on behalf of all those who have been enlightened by your wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. A small clarification, like the finances, when it comes to public health emergencies, the public health sector lacks a dedicated fund for disbursement. Not the DM sector. DM sector, they have some funds, but the public health sector sort of depends on the government funding that was allocated to the Ministry of Health. Within that funding, we have to sort of carve out some of the portions to manage public health emergencies. Thank you very much again for highlighting some of these regional aspects and also the civil military coordination. I think we can have another discussion on the level of civil military collaboration in public health emergencies. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay,
you.
thank you everyone. So I think we are little over than our allocated time for 1 hour, and I really appreciate Leru and Dr. Umar for your concluding remarks as well, and everyone who participated. So this presentation will be available on PRISA's YouTube channel and also on the website, so you can watch, share, and comment as well. Thank you again. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you, Resman. Thank you.
Bye bye.